All right. Well,
It's the John Show.
yeah. You better hurry up and get over here. Welcome back. This is Two Beards and a Bible. I'm John Swano.
I'm Dave Tenney.
And we believe that we should pick up somewhere around 1 Timothy chapter 6.
That's what we believe.
So,
Is that doctrine?
yeah, for now it is.
Because we're going to be talking about it.
Right. All right. So who...
I guess I'll read.
Okay.
I'm going to read the first 10 No, I'm going to read the first 2 verses.
Okay.
What do you think of that? Let as many bondservants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and his doctrine may not be blasphemed. And those who have believing masters, let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather serve them, because those who are benefited are believers and beloved. Teach and exhort these things. So that's one of these things. We've talked about this same thing multiple times.
Right. From the context of looking at this and understanding that there are bondservants and there are masters, and sometimes those bondservants and masters are brethren.
Yes.
When you take that into the entire context of what the scriptures tell you how you're supposed to treat your brethren, this idea of the bondservant really starts to look a little different than maybe sometimes how it's painted.
Yeah.
As slavery and
Yeah,
so on,
yeah.
as we understand it. And we said that in a previous episode, basically. But this is still, even though there may be that we call that a legal obligation between two people, that doesn't usurp the authority that Christ has and the teaching that we're supposed to treat each other well.
Right. Certainly they lived in a different society than we do today.
Right.
We think because we live a certain way, that's the way it's always been.
Right.
But certainly for much of history, there haven't been banks to bail people out of financial things. And when you didn't pay your bills, you went bankrupt. It wasn't like today in our country. Back then, you get thrown in debtor's prison, which could be really bad, or you may enslave yourself to someone, or maybe your country was invaded by some army and they took everybody away, and you were the ones lucky enough to be a slave.
Right.
Right. Other than getting killed. Of course, some of the slavery was pretty tough too, but
right, and it all things are not equal, and some of those things, some of the horrible things that have happened between men throughout history, mankind is what I'm talking about. Some of those horrible things, the way that they've treated each other and so on, that has created certain situations in people's lives, and you can't just. It took a long time to get away from those things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. The Bible doesn't condemn slavery,
right?
And that's why I think there were a lot of pretty intense arguments around the time of the Civil War, and I think brethren at that time that said, "Hey, let's not get involved in this."
Right.
They were wise,
right?
Because that's not what the Bible teaches,
right?
But
and so to kind of back up your words just a minute ago, the Bible doesn't condemn slavery, but it does condemn the foul treatment.
Oh, absolutely, of anybody,
of individuals,
even of a dog.
Right.
So,
and so, what you have to realize is the thing you're reading about here in the scriptures, it's not equal.
No, it's not equal to what that was.
To the things that we know of from our more recent history, and those things have always been despicable. Yeah. And
there's no doubt that there were slave owners in our American history that were good men and treated those that were enslaved, honorably.
Right.
But the opposite was also true. And I don't say that to try to justify slavery. I'm just saying that's the way it was.
Right.
Right. So
and because it is the way that it was, it takes some time. Just like just like God understood that it was going to take time to get mankind to a place where they were ready to receive Christ
Yeah.
and understand the more of what that sacrifice meant. The old law was that teacher to bring
Yeah.
people forward, and a lot of the situations that we see in history that had to be corrected took some time to do so because lifestyles were established and things were established that were very hard to just you just can't just tell someone, okay, well, great, you're free now, go live like everybody else.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like I said, we think everybody lived the way we live. Well,
Right.
If our banking systems collapsed and somehow I got myself into debt and I was either going to go to prison or I had some other option, well, you would still do this.
Right.
It's not, yeah, and in a way, it's, we still do it today. You buy a house, you have to go to the bank, you have to work a job,
Right.
and those aren't things that you do because, hey, I got lots of free time, let's just do this.
Right.
You do those things because those are the things you have to do to make a go at it. And it's, in a way, are you a slave to your employer? Absolutely. Right?
Right.
You're getting paid for it, but the way things, at least with my situation, I'm not making millions of dollars.
Right.
So,
Right. And that's an interesting point. And the scriptures do speak of, as far as sin goes, and I'm not saying your job is a sin.
you're right.
As far as sin goes, you can become a slave to that. You can become a slave to many things.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if I'm sure that some other translations call it a slave rather than a bondservant.
Right.
Bondservant has this meaning of you put yourself under this because of some kind of debt,
Right.
a bond.
Right.
But I'm sure there were other situations too. But
Right.
the important thing is God tells us how we're supposed to treat each other,
Yeah.
regardless of the social norms of the day.
Yeah.
We're still expected to behave a certain way.
Yeah. And there's some, there's some authority that is owed because of that relationship. That bond, if you will,
Yeah.
that would be between those two people. And, even more so, speaking to the way that we treat each other in the church, if there happened to be a situation where amongst brethren there was one who was over another in some way, you don't despise them.
Right.
You realize that they're brothers.
Yeah, I had a gentleman who was a fellow Christian who I was his boss, and we worked together for 8 years. And as far as I'm concerned, it was a wonderful thing. I think he would probably say the same thing. I mean,
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about, and
Yeah.
I think so too.
yeah, it was a good thing.
He still talks to you.
We were still good friends, But I missed that because I was able to confide in this person,
Right.
So, well, John, I think we beat that down.
All right.
We've beat it down multiple times throughout this series. So.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of repeating
Yeah.
themes here.
3 through 10.
All right. So then in 1 Timothy chapter 6 at verse 3, beginning, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, reviling, evil suspicions, useless wranglings, of men, corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. From such withdraw yourself. Now godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows.
Okay. He uses this idea of doctrine twice here. Mm-hmm. So in the first verse, it's the first verse. He says, "Bondservants, as are under the yoke, count their masters worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and His doctrine may not be blasphemed." And again, he talks over here in what you just read about things being with a doctrine of godliness. What does doctrine mean?
It's teaching. It's basically the set of rules that are taught.
Yeah. Yeah, so when somebody has sound or unsound doctrine, it's talking about sound or unsound teaching. That's all it means.
Yeah.
So that's why in verse 3 it starts off, he says, if anyone teaches otherwise. Otherwise, what's he talking about? Well, he's talking about what he just talked about, bondservants.
Right.
How they ought to treat each other.
Yeah.
He says, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud. So let's just stop there. So if somebody is, I think he's making this point is if somebody teaches something different about that, he goes, that person has a problem.
Yeah.
That person isn't teaching the doctrine of God, or it isn't the teaching of God at all.
And think about that in light of what we were talking about a few moments ago. That puts the nail in the coffin to the idea that there is some sort of teaching in the Bible that that we're supposed to, lord over people, and that the things, the horrible things that we've seen done throughout history by men, they fall into this category of the proud, knowing nothing, obsessed with disputes, and all those things that we're going to read here.
Right. And again, I got to keep making this point. He's not talking about, that's the thing a lot of people don't understand. The Bible does not condemn slavery anywhere. Right? It doesn't do it. But it talks about the relationship of how people ought to act. So if that relationship, if people are acting wrong, that's what's condemned.
Like many other things, and correct me if my thinking's going astray here, but like many other institutions we have in life, it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
God didn't say anything about it.
Nope, he didn't. He's silent about it.
But it does mean that if we enter into something like that, we are still, every human being is under the law or the rule, the doctrine, if you will, that you treat each other well.
Right. Certainly when we're talking Christians here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Christians are bound to treat each other in a certain manner, and treat everybody in a certain manner, hopefully.
Right. And we're even taught, in other places to treat those who are outside, with respect and to be helpful.
So somebody who would not teach, who would not treat their bondservant well, I think that's what he's getting here.
Yeah.
So a man who doesn't treat his bondservant well, he is said to be, he said that he is proud and he knows nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words, from which come envy, strife, evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men, of corrupt minds, and destitute of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. From such withdraw yourself. So I think I think that, in my opinion, this is all directed at basically slave owners. Mm-hmm. And if they're not treating their slaves or bondservants the way they ought to, then you should get away from them people.
Well, there is so much in those few words. There's so much that hits as you'd read down through that we might need 2 episodes to talk about to unwrap all those things, which we probably will not because we don't have time for that.
But it talks about the heart of this man.
It does, yeah, yeah.
And a man who would treat his slaves terribly, he's got something else on his mind.
Yeah, it's interesting that it starts out with proud. He's proud because how many times, think back, and I know you and I and most of the people listening probably have never been in a situation where they considered themselves even close to a bondservant. But, as we think about this, how many times have you had someone who was maybe a manager in a place that you worked or had some sort of position over you at some point that was proud and in love with themselves?
So we're here in Orville, Ohio, and Orville, Ohio is the home of Coach Bob Knight.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Coach Bob Knight, he was a proud man. And when somebody would disrespect, if he perceived somebody was disrespecting him, he would lose his mind.
Yeah.
And, I think this kind of speaks to that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the idea of, he's proud knowing nothing. So when you're proud, when your mind is all wrapped up in how special I am, and that's what you're thinking is I've got everything cornered here. You don't know anything because you don't stop to think,
right?
Because you're wrapped up in your own being, and obsessed with disputes and arguments over words. How many times have we been in situations, sadly, sometimes even among brethren, where we get into some disputes over words and we get nowhere. We take steps backwards.
Oh yeah,
in maybe in making decisions for the church and so on. Sometimes you run into that sort of a thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times, a lot of times when I teach, I always talk about using a dictionary because a lot of times we read words and we don't understand what they mean.
Right.
And a lot of people will get hung up on a word and like, well, you're misusing that. Or maybe it's me. I'm misusing the word. That's why I don't understand it.
Right. And a lot of the meaning of the words is connected to the context. Yeah. And when you study in a broader way, you study the scriptures and you can gain the meaning from it after reading everything in context.
Yes.
For the most part. And I know I fell into the trap when I first started preaching of putting the vines next to me, at the podium when I would teach Bible study or conduct Bible study. And when something would come up, my first inkling was let's go to that word and see what that word looks like. And you get into these, not
that it's bad.
Not meaning to, but you get into kind of a wrangling. And especially, we get a bunch of human beings in the room. There's a chance that one of them or two of them might be, they might fancy themselves to be a linguist of some sort.
Right.
Right. And so you get into these wranglings over what does that word mean and what's the minutia around the Greek.
Meanwhile, you've missed the whole point of the passage.
Right. And so I've pushed that book away and realized that, that's not the time to pull that thing out. Let's just talk about the generalities. Let's get everything, a general picture here, and then we can go home and look those things up to our heart's content.
Yeah. I had a guy ask a question in Bible class this last Sunday morning, and he already was going down the wrong road, but I just let him go. And then he said, and then I said, oh yeah, that's a really good point. I said, but I think it was talking about this. And it's like, so I don't have to correct everything that was said. We'll just point out that, the first thing you started talking about, I think you were off on that.
Right.
So everything else you said probably.
And that, that's just, that's wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. So he has all this different stuff in here. So, this man supposes that godliness is a means of gain.
Yeah. So whether or not you this applies, I think it does in my mind. But you've seen the movie, The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
So think of the warden. He's a very religious man. When the inmates first get there, he gives them a Bible and speaks to them about the importance of the Bible while they're in there, and they're going to learn some things about the Bible. And he was involved in all of those church organizations, and look what he was doing. He was looking at that as a means for like a gain. And a lot of people, I think, in the religious world, they do it because it's kind of like it's a good place to network, and socialize, and they're completely missing the point of the kind of gain you should be getting from godliness.
Yeah, and here he says, from such withdraw yourself. Now, here's the thing: sometimes we think, oh, we need to withdraw from this. This is talking about some formal action. No, it's not. What it's saying is just stay away from them, people.
No, don't hang around them.
Don't hang around those people.
Yeah. There's, maybe I'm sure at some point in your life, your parents or somebody might have said, just stay away from those fellas over there.
Yeah.
And
I don't like the ones you're hanging out with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of times that's really good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what he's saying. Hey, don't hang around these people. He says, now godliness with contentment is great gain. And amen.
Yeah. And what's the contentment? Where's it come from?
It comes, certainly it comes from knowing that you're right with God. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the other part it comes with is just being satisfied with what you have.
Yeah, satisfied's a good word. It doesn't mean that you're ecstatically happy with the situation.
Yeah.
It just means that you're satisfied.
Yeah.
I don't need that. I don't desire that.
Yeah. Lots of stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
He says, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out.
Yeah.
Right? So, what's that old, he who dies with the most toys wins?
Right.
Right? No, he still dies. Right?
Right. Now, on the way over here, I was listening to a podcast, and a guy was being interviewed, and he was talking about how he had spent, I think, a month of time sequestering himself away from screens and devices and just general society. He went and lived with some monks for a while, and he went and lived with the Amish for a while.
Okay.
And he, in doing that, one of the things that he had said is that he felt like he was much happier, not knowing all of the things that were going on in the world and going on around him, and he wasn't, he had to break himself almost like an addict from, every time, and I do this, it rang in my mind, is that I'll think about something just going through the day, I wonder what this is about, and I reach for my phone and let's Google it, let's find out. And, there's something to be said for not having all these things at your fingertips, but just having to use your brain and think about something for a while. And this, this also, when we think about contentment, just being able to be not necessarily happy, but just being satisfied, as you said, in the moment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's what this is talking about.
Me and some guys at work were talking about, it was somebody won $1 million or something. And I said, if I had $1 million, I wouldn't even know what to do with it.
Right.
So I don't really want anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't buy things, because I do.
Right.
But what I'm talking about. It's like.
Yeah. But there is a, I in my life see a change from where I was, 20, 30 years ago. Like if it were, there was a time where I would have wanted to be like Jay Leno and have,
a million cars,
a bunch of cars, and all sorts of things like that. And I don't really want that anymore. I really don't even desire it. I consider myself the caretaker of 2 cars that have been passed down through my family, but sometimes I see those as a burden.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't really need that.
Right.
And that's that's
Well, you've inherited 2 cars and you've got 2 sons.
Yeah.
So it's all going to work out just right.
yeah, right. But that's the idea of being, as you said, satisfied. I think that's the best synonym
Right.
for contentment.
And he goes on further. He says, and having food and clothings, with this we shall be content.
Yeah,
Well, that's not much.
right.
But, if you've ever been hungry, it's quite a bit, actually.
I think our wives are on a call over there, so let's just tell them that we're going to sell everything and we're just going to have food and clothing.
Yeah, that's good enough.
See how that works out.
Yeah. Probably not so much.
But, you get the idea. At different times in your life, you're going to have, just like everybody has, ups and downs. And when you get to those downs where maybe you don't have everything that maybe you once did or that you think you'd like to have, just being content and being able to be satisfied with that. I think of the people who I hear stories about from the time of the Great Depression who, committed suicide because their bank accounts dried up.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to exist without
all of those things.
Without that thing that identified them.
Yeah. I that would be hard.
Sure.
Not to make light of it, losing everything you have would be hard.
Oh, absolutely.
He says, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and snare and many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So he's talking about somebody who's not content with what they have. Mm-hmm. Right? So we just talked about, this is all in the context of slave owners. Mm-hmm. Right? So these guys are apparently, that Paul was addressing, are not content with what they have. Mm-hmm. And because they're not, they're always working towards, getting more stuff. Well, that is driving their decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so, they might be desirous of continuing or increasing the amount of people that they have under their control. They might, and as we understand with, human beings, how many people then start to encroach upon this power, encroach onto others with this power that they might have, and start falling into all sorts of other harmful lusts, as it's put.
Yeah, absolutely.
There.
I like this next. He says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. People say, oh, money is the root of all evil. Well, that's not what the Bible says.
Yeah, I was going to say that's one of the most misquoted verses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's the love of money.
Yeah.
And for another thing, it's not of evil, it's of all kinds of evil.
Yeah.
But, there's other lusts or love that lead to sin as well that have nothing to do with money.
Yeah. Now, you have all kinds of chickens out there in the backyard.
Oh,
you don't.
Are you
have
not
all.
lusting after my eggs, are you? Because we ain't getting too many.
But you don't have all the chickens.
No, we don't have them all. I'm happy about that.
But that's the kind of language there.
Yeah.
That the idea of that it gets you into a lot of trouble, and as it says, some have strayed from their faith, in their greediness. Who was it that strayed from the faith? One comes to mind because of greed.
I mean, I think about Eve.
Okay,
That's
one. That's the first one, certainly.
You think about you're probably talking about Judas
and Simon the sorcerer.
Yeah. Right.
And so what kinds of troubles? Judas is a good one.
Yeah.
Because of his greed, he was literally and figuratively pierced through.
Yeah.
With all kinds of sorrow.
Yep.
And when you think and you look at, maybe people today that only are chasing after things to feed greed.
Yeah.
They're some of the most pitiful, sorrowful people that you can come across. They're just not doing well.
Yeah.
And so many people that we look at, several could be named that you and I maybe looked at growing up as, being on top of the world and having everything. And they got so low in their life that they took their lives.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's 1,000 stories just like that.
Right.
Well, John, I think we've got her.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.